She's literally sitting on the street. Film her, fellas, her. What a mess. Keep filming.
It's not much, but you'll be safe here tonight.
Why are you doing this for a stranger?
Easy, I got you. One step at a time.
I don't even know where I am.
He was a broke single dad who helped a dirty homeless woman. She turned out to be the CEO who owned his building. The night everything changed, the city never truly slept. At 11:47 p.m. on a cold Chicago Friday, Marcus Hayes was walking back to his car after a double shift at the warehouse, his body aching in places he hadn't known could ache. His white t-shirt clung to muscles built not from a gym membership he couldn't afford, but from years of lifting boxes, carrying groceries for elderly neighbors, and hoisting his 7-year-old daughter Amara onto his shoulders like she weighed nothing at all. He had $43 in his wallet, a pile of unpaid bills on his kitchen counter, and exactly 0 reasons to stop walking. But then he saw her. She was sitting on the sidewalk near the intersection of Michigan Avenue, her back against a concrete pillar, her knees pulled to her chest. Her dress, once expensive, now filthy and torn at the shoulder, was caked with what looked like dried mud. Her dark brown hair hung in tangled wet clumps around her face. She was barefoot. Her eyes were open but distant, staring at nothing the way people stare when the world has knocked them so completely flat they forget what standing feels like. 3 women in tight party dresses stood nearby, laughing loudly, pointing their phones at her. One of them, red dress, gold heels, leaned toward her friends and whispered something that made them all shriek with laughter again. "Look at her, probably drunk. Don't touch her, she's disgusting." Marcus slowed his pace, stopped. Something in his chest pulled hard, the way it always did when he saw someone being treated like they were less than human. He'd been looked at that way before, standing in line at the grocery store counting change, asking for an extension on rent, showing up to Amara's school recital in work clothes because he'd come straight from a shift. He knew what that look felt like. He refused to give it to anyone else. He walked toward the woman on the ground. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "You okay?" She blinked, looked up at him with green eyes that were glassy with exhaustion and something else. Confusion maybe, or the particular kind of shock that follows a serious fall. There was a cut above her left eyebrow, dried blood tracing a thin line down her temple. She opened her mouth, closed it. "I don't know where my phone is." "Can you tell me your name?" when Amara had nightmares. "Can you tell me your name?" "Claire," she whispered. "All right, Claire. I'm Marcus. I'm going to help you up, okay? Can you stand?" The women in party dresses had gone quiet now, watching with wide eyes and slightly open mouths. The one in the red dress lowered her phone, looking uncomfortable. Marcus extended his hand. Claire stared at it for a moment, large, calloused, steady, and then she took it. He pulled her gently to her feet, keeping one arm around her shoulder when she wobbled. "She's probably on something," one of the women muttered. Marcus turned to look at them. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His expression said it clearly enough. "You had the same opportunity I did. You chose differently." The women walked away. Marcus had planned to call a cab for her. That was the extent of what he'd imagined doing. Making sure she had a ride to wherever she needed to go, maybe paying the first $10 of the fare. But when he asked Claire where she lived, she looked at him with those exhausted green eyes and said quietly, "I genuinely don't know what happened tonight." That scared him more than anything else. She wasn't drunk, he could tell. Her speech was clear, her eyes were tracking properly, she wasn't stumbling. She was just gone somewhere inside herself. Shock maybe, or something worse. He made a decision. It wasn't a calculated one. It was the same impulse that made him leave food on Mrs. Patterson's doorstep every Thursday. The same one that made him stay late at his nephew's basketball practices even when he was exhausted. He was Marcus Hayes. He didn't leave people behind. "I live 20 minutes from here," he said. "I have a couch, clean clothes, and I can make you something hot to eat. Tomorrow morning when you've slept, we'll figure out where you need to be. Is that okay?" Claire looked at him for a long time. In another life, maybe she would have said no. In another life, she had systems and security teams and a personal assistant who handled every unpredictable variable before it reached her. But tonight she was barefoot on a Chicago sidewalk with dried blood on her face and a stranger offering her the only thing she genuinely needed. "Okay," she said. "Yes, thank you." His apartment was small but spotless. Amara's drawings covered the refrigerator in an explosion of crayon color. Rainbows, horses, stick figure families with disproportionately large heads. A framed photo on the bookshelf showed Marcus and a little girl laughing at the camera, both of them slightly blurry, both of them completely, obviously happy. Claire stood in the entryway and looked at that photo for a long time. Marcus handed her a towel, a clean t-shirt, and a pair of joggers with a drawstring. "Bathroom's the second door on the left. I'll heat up some soup." "You live here alone?" she asked. "With my daughter. She's with her grandma tonight." He hesitated, then added simply, "Her mom passed away 3 years ago." Claire looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since he'd pulled her off the sidewalk. "I'm sorry. We're okay," he said. And the way he said it made it clear that it was true, earned through years of choosing to be okay one hard morning at a time. "Go get cleaned up. Soup'll be ready." She found out later when the hospital ran a routine check at her request the following morning that she'd had a mild concussion. She'd been mugged 3 blocks from the restaurant where she'd been having dinner. Phone stolen, shoes taken, wallet gone. She'd wandered in a daze for nearly 40 minutes before sitting down on that sidewalk corner. But she didn't know any of that yet. That night she sat at Marcus's small kitchen table in borrowed clothes, eating chicken noodle soup from a pot that had clearly been made from scratch. And she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Safe. She slept on the couch. He left a glass of water and 2 aspirin on the coffee table without being asked. In the morning, Amara came home early. Mrs. Hayes had a hair appointment, and burst through the front door at 7:30 a.m. singing something from a cartoon, stopped dead in the hallway, and stared at the woman on the couch with the calm scientific interest of a child encountering an unexpected variable. "Why is there a lady on our couch, Daddy?" "She needed help," Marcus said from the kitchen, the same tone he might use to explain why the sky was blue. Amara considered this for exactly 3 seconds. "Does she want pancakes? I can help make pancakes." Claire, who had been pretending to still be asleep, opened her eyes and looked at the small girl with the bright eyes and the braids coming slightly undone and said, "I would genuinely love some pancakes." Amara grinned like she'd won something. "Daddy," she said yes. It was at breakfast, flour on the counter, orange juice in mismatched glasses, Amara explaining at great length why butterflies were better than moths. Then Marcus's phone buzzed on the table, a notification. His building management app. A message from the property management company, rent increase effective next month, 40% adjustment per new ownership restructure. His face changed, just slightly, a tightening around the jaw, a flicker behind the eyes that he controlled immediately so Amara wouldn't see it. But Claire saw it. She was watching him over her orange juice. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," he said, "fine." She looked at the phone screen. She couldn't read it from where she sat, but she could read his face, and his face told her everything she needed to know about what kind of man he was. The kind who absorbed bad news quietly so the people around him wouldn't carry it too. She said nothing. Not then. 3 days later, Claire Whitmore walked into a board meeting at Whitmore Capital Group on the 42nd floor of the building she owned, the same building where Marcus Hayes paid rent every month for a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor. She'd been CEO for 11 years. She'd tripled the company's portfolio, acquired 14 properties across Chicago, and was known in business circles for being as precise and controlled as a scalpel. Her assistant had spent 3 days trying to reach her. The press had run a small item about her disappearance. Her security team had quietly searched the city, and none of them had found her. A single dad from a warehouse job had. That afternoon, she called her property management director into her office. She pulled up the file for 1440 South Wabash, Marcus's building. She looked at the 40% rent increase notice that had gone out 2 days ago. She looked at the man who had approved it. "Cancel it," she said. "Ms. Whitmore, the restructuring projections." "Cancel it." Her voice was the kind of quiet that meant the conversation was over. "And pull the files for every tenant in that building. I want a review of every increase we've sent out in the last 6 months. She made 2 more calls that afternoon. The first was to her HR director. The second was to a number she'd written on a piece of paper from Marcus's kitchen notepad in the handwriting of a woman who wasn't sure she'd ever use it, but who had folded it carefully into her jacket pocket before leaving his apartment. Marcus answered on the 3rd ring, his voice slightly wary, He didn't recognize the number. "Marcus," she said, "it's Claire. I want to explain some things. And I want to offer you something, not as a favor, as someone who understands what your work is actually worth." There was a long pause on the line. "You're not just some woman who got lost, are you?" he said slowly. "No," she admitted, "I'm not. But that night you found me? In that moment I was exactly that, just a person on the ground who needed a hand, and you gave it." She paused. Not many people would have. He didn't take charity, she'd expected that. He'd actually argued with her for 20 minutes when she offered to clear his rent account. "That's not why I helped you," he said, and she believed him completely. That was precisely why she'd made the call. What he did accept was a job offer, facilities operations director for the Wabash Avenue properties, a role that needed someone with his practical knowledge, his work ethic, and his particular way of making everyone around him feel like they mattered. He started the following Monday. Amara asked on his first day if the nice lady from the couch was his boss now. "Something like that," Marcus said. Amara thought about this carefully. "She makes good pancakes, though," she said, "so that's okay." Marcus laughed. A real laugh, full and unguarded, for the first time in longer than he could remember. Outside, Chicago was loud and cold and complicated and beautiful, and for Marcus Hayes, the single dad who had stopped on a Friday night when every sensible voice in his head said, "Keep walking," the world had quietly, completely changed.